Tonight, all about the law. We look at the Equifax security breach that is impacting more than 140 million Americans. We'll speak with a local lawmaker who wants to hold that company accountable. Also, outrage over the Trump administration's plan to change how sexual abuses are handled on college campuses. And a possible major development in the Gilgo Beach murder case involving nearly a dozen unresolved murders. Plus, we'll also have a cold case in Westchester County with a killer on the loose 10 years after the killing of a Mamaroneck man.
I think this year is harder than most years because it has been almost a decade. So it's harder this year than at most others.
All of that, plus the latest in the corruption trial of Senator Bob Menendez. We'll be going live to Newark with the latest on that and also look where the case stands right now against a New Jersey Democrat and where it may be headed. Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Now, a lot of local stories for you this evening, but we begin with something that is impacting people far beyond the borders of New York and New Jersey. In fact, more than 140 million Americans, including millions of people obviously from our region as well. I'm talking about the security breach at Equifax. Consumers beware and check your credit report.
The secret is you need to know as quickly as possible you have a problem.
Security experts urging Americans to take the latest data breach seriously, knowing 143 million consumers could be at risk. The hack, believed to have taken place between mid-May and July, but not discovered by Equifax until July 29th.
Well, it's significant because of the sheer size of it and the fact that it occurred at a credit reporting agency.
Equifax, one of three major companies that tracks everything, including your payments on credit cards, mortgages, student and car loans, and utilities, to establish your credit score. The company is now confirming that hackers had access to names, social security numbers, birth dates, addresses, driver's license numbers, and even credit card numbers for more than 200,000 Americans.
No, the problem is that the Social Security number is the skeleton key to our identities.
And even if you're not a customer of Equifax, experts warn your information may not be safe because Equifax gets its information from banks, credit card companies, and lenders, not consumers. Also, we're learning the three Equifax executives sold stock after the breach was discovered, but before the company alerted the public. The company maintains that the executives didn't know about the hack at the time.
I deeply regret this incident, and I apologize to every affected consumer and all of our partners.
I'm sure they regret it, but does the sorrow do it? Now, you just heard the head of Equifax apologize, but a whole lot of people very upset with the way the company has handled this crisis. Now, it offered free credit monitoring services to people who were impacted. But then it asked people for their last names and social security numbers before they could sign up for the service. Obviously, they were reticent to provide that personal info after what happened. Also, Equifax tried to get people to sign away their right to sue if you signed up for the free credit monitoring. But after huge backlash, it backed off. Now, lawsuits, as you can imagine, are starting to pile up. The company now reportedly facing more than 20 class action lawsuits, plus congressional investigators, they're getting involved. Lawmakers on the statewide level are also trying to get answers, and one of them joins us now. State Senator David Carlucci, a Democrat representing all of Rockland County and part of Westchester. He wants Equifax's CEO to testify at an identity theft hearing being held in Albany this month, September 26th. Also joining us, familiar face, Doug Von Oiste, founding partner of Carson Von Oiste, focusing on corporate misconduct, and was selected by the Legal 500 as one of the most influential trial lawyers in the entire country. Gentlemen, thank you. There seems to be a whole lot of levels of not just egregious behavior on the part of Equifax, but this isn't the first rodeo. Right, Senator? I mean, this is like the third time that their security was potentially breached. Is this... Forget about how they handled it after they discovered a problem. What do you want to learn if you can compel them to testify about failures in security, whatever, that put so many millions of Americans' security and safety at risk?
I mean, this is absolutely outrageous, and we need answers. Richard Smith, we just saw him on TV, says he's sorry, but we need to know answers. We need to know what happened, and we have to take steps to mitigate the potential hazards that consumers now face. I mean, Americans are at risk. Over 143 million consumers. I mean, That's pretty much everyone in
Give me
in
an
our country.
idea. Give an idea to somebody at home, because the odds are basically half of them, and maybe the number could even be more, but at least half of them could be impacted. If their personal data, Social Security numbers, basic economic history, in the wrong hands of somebody, tell people what that could mean to them.
We really don't know the full extent of this. As we've seen, they're offering this free credit monitoring for a year. I mean, the hackers could sit on this data for years and then strike while the iron's hot. We don't know what potential hazards this could lead to, but what I fear is a real identity crisis, something where we have a problem with knowing anyone's true identity. And these credit rating agencies, I mean, they've lost all credibility. We call them, they're doing a credit check, but they've got no credibility. And we never asked to do business with them, and yet they have no liability. They have no laws on the books that say, hey, you have to have certain protocol in place to keep consumers data
And I
safe.
want to get to both the consequences and possible remedy for consumers with Doug in a second. But Senator, the other part of this is not just the lack of security that was in effect proffered or even promised up to the public, but after it was discovered, there seemed to be two major problems that they have to answer, whether it be before you or Congress, which is you waited 6 weeks before you told people what the problem was, and allegedly 3 different execs at Equifax cashed out as much as $2 million in terms of stock before the public even knew about the problem?
It's an indictment on the entire system, because as you look at the laws on the books, they're woefully behind protecting the consumers of today. There's nothing on the books that says they have to notify consumers at any time. What they're doing now is they're not even notifying the people that were affected. They're asking you to go to a website to find out if you might have had a problem, if your data might have been compromised. I think in New York State, we need to lead the way, come up with some real ways of really modernizing the industry. I think we really have to change this industry because it's leaving too many consumers at risk.
And it also brings up a huge question for me, which I'll get into in a second with you, about the need for regulation and the conversation we're going to have potentially at least in the next 3 years about these kinds of subjects. But Doug, okay, if I'm an Equifax customer here, I say, they sold me a false bill of goods and they put me at extreme risk. We mentioned there could be 20 different class action lawsuits. You've talked time and time again where one of the trends that's going on is if you read the fine print, you're signing away your rights here to sue because of a thing called arbitration. Explain again to the folks using this as an example what Equifax tried to do, and also where we are in terms of remedy for people if they say, wait a minute, I got hosed here.
Well, after the breach, Equifax set up a credit monitoring service that people could sign up for. Even when they had that set up, they tried to slip in an arbitration clause and saying, basically an arbitration clause means you have a right to bring a lawsuit, you can go before a jury, you can tell the jury what happened, and the jury decides what the damages are. With an arbitration clause, you're waiving your right to that. And what basically you're contracting for is you're contracting away your right to a jury, and you're in front of arbiters who will listen to it. And often those people are appointed by business, big business.
Sometimes the same businesses that you're looking for them at least to hopefully provide justice for.
Right.
So now we've got the 20 class action lawsuits moving forward. What do you anticipate will happen here?
Well, the class action lawsuits are one thing, and people are saying, they have some sort of, you negligently protected my information, and that's fine. But and you also have another set of lawsuits that are saying they didn't report it quick enough, so the value of the company, if you had stocks, maybe you're affected that way. But the real thing that they're not talking about is that if you're one of the victims of this crime, one of those 143 million people, at some point your identity could be stolen and could be used, and your bank accounts could get wiped out, your credit history destroyed, and at that point you're going to turn to somebody and you're going to say it must have been Equifax. And that nice little apology you saw from the CEO, believe me, when you go to that company at that point and you say, hey, help me out, they took all of my money, can you help me? He's not going to be apologizing to you. That company is going to say, prove it. Prove where you got it from. And that person is going to be lost. And that's the real sad thing about this that nobody's really talking about.
You never know, once the information's stolen, who in effect the perpetrators become once the hack's complete. And it lends itself to a much broader question because basically consumer protections in this country, it has been proposed by this current administration in Washington right now under Trump that we want to do away with that because that's too much regulations, too much red tape. It's holding companies from the ability to grow, et cetera. Can we imagine if there's even more deregulation? I'm not trying to, create panic here, but with little regulation we have, Senator, if we don't even have that, what happens then? It's a Wild West,
really
right?
We have so little. I mean, the first thing we have to do is really bring a new definition of what a data breach is. Because right now, there's really not a modern definition in terms of certain information is leaked without a password. Oh, it doesn't qualify as a data breach. Well, this information is very potent. It can be devastating, as Doug had said. So we've got to define what it means to have a data breach. We need to define how long it takes to contact the people that have been affected. I mean, the criminals here, or whatever they were using this data for, they had a 6-week head start. And in between there, executives unloading stocks. I mean, it's just, it reeks of foul play.
So it then begs a question from me. What are you hoping to achieve if you can get this guy to testify under oath before you guys in Albany, let alone, obviously Washington wants to get their hands on him too. How's it going to work?
We need to give the power to the consumer. Right now, we have so little power in this whole process. Our credit could be jeopardized in so many different ways, and there's so much little we can do. And in a society where it's depending more and more on our credit and on our identification, we've really got to safeguard this. So beyond the two things that I mentioned, in terms of quickly identifying people and notifying them that they've been victims, to the fact of what an actual data breach is, but then we have to go to how do we protect the consumer, and something like a credit freeze. They charge for that. They're offering some waiving of the fees right now. But I think every credit rating agency has to do that. They have to provide the consumer with the ability to freeze our credit. That should be commonplace. And in New York, what I'm going to be pushing for is that in New Yorkers, if you want to cover, do credit rating for New Yorkers, that you're going to have to provide them with a credit freeze. We shouldn't have anybody being able to do a credit check on you without your notification. And that's something that could cut back tremendously on identity theft fraud. The companies, though, they're going to fight it every step of the way. They make money when they can easily take your data and sell it to anybody that wants to pay for it, leaving us very susceptible to fraud.
And I'll be honest, thankfully, I have not been a victim, that I know of at least, of this kind of, basically credit hijacking. However, you just gave a chilling point. I think a lot of people say, well, they hack me and I'm harmed. I just go to the person that dropped the ball. Like if somebody kites a false check at a bank, the bank makes me whole later. You can't prove where this injustice started. So Equifax might say, like you did, and I never realized this, hey, they may have hacked us, but how do you know it came from us? It could have came from anybody here. Prove that it came, from basically a flaw in our system. You can't get made whole now going forward, right?
Well, people are going to fight like hell to do it, but the first thing they're going to say when you sue them and say, I want my money back, they're going to say, prove it.
Unbelievable. All right, I wish you the best of luck in Albany, Senator. Thank you. And Doug, we'll be seeing you in just a little bit. Now, the Trump administration is looking to also change the way that college campuses deal with sexual abuse. And they're not moving to help the victims. The head of the New York Office of Victim Services will join us. And trust me, she's none too happy about it. Then we're going to take a look at a cold case in Mamaroneck where a man was killed 10 years ago in his own home. But the case remains an unsolved mystery.